There's just been a shocking revelation from federal authorities regarding a highly private and scandalous video involving none other than Jay-Z and Beyonce.
The man who claimed he was sex trafficked by Sean Combs paraded around a party where multiple celebrities were allegedly present and then assaulted has now dropped two big names from his lawsuit, Jay-Z and Beyonce.
When somebody like Diddy gets taken down, things always start out as a rumor. Diddy has had rumors floating around for like decades. Well, Jay-Z had a problem. He right there in the corner, by the way. Jay-Z has had a few rumors himself.
Jay-Z's legal team had fought to get the case dismissed, but the judge disagreed.
This case was already messy, and now it's getting murkier by the day. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any weirder, a quiet update slipped into the court records that sent shockwaves through every timeline paying attention. Beyonce and Jay-Z. Yes, those Beyonce and Jay-Z have officially been removed from a civil lawsuit that originally named them as witnesses tied to one of Diddy's most disturbing allegations. But instead of settling things down, it's only made people more suspicious. Because once your name is attached to that kind of lawsuit, it doesn't just vanish quietly. And fans? They're not exactly buying the cleanup attempt. Here's the thing. They weren't accused directly. They weren't being sued for damages. They were listed as witnesses, people who were allegedly present at one of Diddy's now infamous private parties. Specifically, a 2015 incident involving a man named Joseph Menzaro. He filed a lawsuit claiming that he was drugged, transported against his will, and then publicly humiliated in a disturbing, highly inappropriate event allegedly hosted by Diddy. And yes, that's where Beyonce and Jay-Z's names appeared. According to the lawsuit, Menzaro said he was dragged to the party unconscious, wearing an inappropriate costume meant to embarrass, and forced to walk in front of high-profile guests. He claimed that Jay-Z and Beyonce were seated in the room during the ordeal, and even quoted Beyonce as saying, "What's this all about? Why is this half-dressed man standing here in front of me?" That quote, whether it's real or exaggerated, immediately raised eyebrows, not just because of what was allegedly said, but because of who said it and where it was being said. Now fast forward, the lawsuit gets amended, quietly, no press release, no viral headlines. Suddenly, Jay-Z and Beyonce's names are gone. Joseph Menzaro updated his filing to remove the Carters from the document altogether, and the explanation? Practically non-existent. The change happened in early April, and while some assumed it meant there was no evidence linking them to the incident, others weren't so quick to let go. Because here's where it gets complicated. The original filing didn't just mention Beyonce and Jay-Z casually. It named them in the room, in the moment, as witnesses. And if that information was included without hard evidence, then yes, it makes sense to remove them legally. But if it was true, then removing them now just feels like damage control. Either way, the internet immediately went into detective mode. Why were they mentioned in the first place? Who gave that quote? Who placed them at the party? Was it a fabrication? Or was it a legal misstep they had to correct? Let's be clear. There's no confirmed evidence that Beyonce or Jay-Z were involved in the planning or execution of anything harmful that night. But just being named in a case that graphic, that serious, is enough to ignite controversy. And now that their names have been taken out, the conversation hasn't ended. It's just shifted. Because here's what people are asking now. If their inclusion was false, why were they mentioned in such specific terms? And if it was true, and they were present, why remove them now? Is it a legal tactic to reduce backlash? Is it a strategic move to keep the focus on Diddy? Or is it something deeper, like powerful influence behind the scenes, ensuring their names are erased before the media storm gets any worse? The removal of their names isn't some random paperwork fix. It's a loaded action with massive implications, especially when we're talking about two of the most carefully protected, image-conscious celebrities in the entire world. Jay-Z and Beyonce have spent decades building a brand around privacy, prestige, and perfection. Being caught up in a lawsuit of this nature, even on the sidelines, is the exact kind of narrative they avoid at all costs. So the timing, the silence, the sudden edit, it's no wonder people are skeptical. And here's where it gets even more layered. Some online commentators believe the Carters' removal is less about factual correction and more about legal shielding, meaning, yes, they may have been there, or yes, someone may have seen them. But unless there's proof of wrongdoing, it's safer to exclude them from the official case. That doesn't necessarily clear the air, it just muddies the water. Because now we have a version of events where either The original claim was exaggerated or false. There was some kind of agreement to quietly pull them out of the spotlight. And this isn't the first time questions have swirled around their association with Diddy. Over the years, Beyonce and Jay-Z have been photographed at countless events with Diddy, from black tie galas to exclusive private gatherings. They've been part of that elite circle. Artists, moguls, executives, all at the top of the food chain. And that's not illegal, it's just the reality of fame. But when someone from that circle ends up at the center of one of the biggest scandals in modern entertainment, the question shifts from, were you friends, to what did you see? And that's where the discomfort begins. This isn't about guilt by association, it's about public curiosity. When the allegations are this dark and the names this recognizable, people want to know more. The idea that Beyonce and Jay-Z were simply in the room when something traumatic allegedly unfolded, that idea alone is enough to set timelines on fire. Not because anyone's accusing them of wrongdoing, but because the silence afterward feels strategic. The lawsuit didn't just name them vaguely. It placed them there at a party in a room with a very specific reaction. That level of detail doesn't happen by accident. Someone gave that quote, someone gave that timeline, which makes their sudden removal feel less like a correction and more like a quiet retreat. Now, to be fair, there's still no official confirmation that they were ever at the location in question. That's why their removal makes legal sense. Without evidence, you can't name people in a filing, even as witnesses. But that hasn't stopped fans and critics alike from asking questions. And those questions are piling up quickly. Like, why name them at all if it wasn't true? Why include a quote that makes Beyonce sound like she was caught off guard by what she saw? Why risk dragging in two of the most protected celebrities on earth unless someone truly believed they were involved, at least as bystanders? And the timing makes it even more suspicious. Because right now, Diddy's world is collapsing. Civil lawsuits, federal raids, investigations tied to trafficking and abuse, witnesses coming forward, videos being leaked, former bodyguards spilling decades of secrets. And in the middle of that storm, the Carters' names appear briefly, only to vanish again a few weeks later. This is where public perception gets tricky, because even if the lawsuit removal is 100% justified, people don't process it that way. They see it as part of a larger pattern, one where powerful figures can be scrubbed from controversy, while the less protected ones take the hit. We've seen this before. When the Harvey Weinstein scandal broke, countless celebrities who once praised him suddenly didn't know what he was doing behind closed doors. When Jeffrey Epstein's guest list leaked, many big names suddenly had no comment, despite public photos showing otherwise. And when stories like these surface, when survivors come forward with detailed, painful memories, the public instinct isn't to trust the silence, it's to question it. So now people are looking at Beyonce and Jay-Z, not with blame, but with suspicion. Like, were you really there? If so, did you say anything? Did you leave? Did you know what kind of event you were attending? These aren't accusations. They're reflections of a growing unease. Because when the same celebrities who use their platforms to speak out on justice, empowerment, and protecting the vulnerable suddenly go quiet when it hits close to home, it feels like selective activism. Again, there is no evidence that the Carters did anything wrong. But when your name appears in a lawsuit, describing an incident as serious as what Menzaro outlined, and that name disappears quietly, the story doesn't die, it just changes shape. And here's another layer, one that makes this story even harder to ignore. According to the lawsuit, Menzaro claims he was lured to the event, drugged, and transported through a concealed route connected to a high-profile residence. Once he arrived, he says he was placed in a deeply humiliating situation in front of A-list attendees. And while the suit no longer names specific celebrities, the idea that those celebrities were there still lingers, and that's enough to keep the speculation alive. Especially in the age of internet detectives, podcast exposés, and fans who will dig through flight logs, tour dates, social media posts, and paparazzi footage just to put together a timeline. Within hours of the removal, people were online trying to figure out if Beyonce and Jay-Z were even in the same city that week. Some threads pointed to a nearby gala. Others mentioned private jet landings. Again, none of it proves anything. But the fact that people are looking speaks volumes. Because once the internet thinks you're hiding something, it doesn't stop digging. And the Carters? They've built their careers on mystique, silence, and control. Their strategy has always been say less, show less, let the art do the talking. But in this moment, that strategy is starting to backfire. Because when the world is looking for transparency, silence starts to feel like evasion. And when silence feels like evasion, even innocent people can get caught in the wave. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Once your name is attached to something this big, this dark, no amount of edits can completely wipe the slate clean. Sure, the lawsuit's been amended. Jay-Z and Beyonce have been officially removed, but the ripple effect of their mention is already out there. The screenshots, the YouTube breakdowns, the Twitter threads, the podcast speculation. People aren't going to forget just because the court filing changed. Because here's how it looks to the average person. Your name was there, and then it wasn't. So what happened in between? Was it a mistake, or was it handled behind the scenes? Now, let's be realistic. If there was truly no basis for their names being included, then removing them was the correct legal move. That's not the issue. The issue is that this situation isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the middle of a scandal that's already exposed how deep, messy, and well-connected this entire case really is. And that's where people's imaginations start to run wild. Because if the allegations against Diddy are true, if those disturbing stories of abuse, coercion, and manipulation are accurate, then it makes sense that people would look harder at everyone who shared space with him during those years, everyone who partied with him, everyone who stood next to him smiling on red carpets, everyone who even silently may have witnessed things they never spoke about. That doesn't make every celebrity guilty, but it does make them relevant. And in this climate, relevance invites scrutiny, especially when the celebrity in question is someone like Beyonce, whose public image is so pristine, so controlled, so carefully maintained, that even the hint of controversy feels jarring. Beyonce doesn't get caught in drama. She doesn't engage in feuds. She barely even gives interviews. Her silence is her power. But silence also creates distance, and when something like this happens, that distance can be misinterpreted. People begin to wonder, is she staying quiet because she's above it, or because she has something to hide? Same with Jay-Z. He's built his legacy on control, respect, and reinvention. From street rapper to business mogul, from controversy to cultural icon. But his association with Diddy goes back decades. They've worked together. They've celebrated together. They've stood side by side as titans of the same era. So when someone places Jay-Z at one of Diddy's more questionable events, even if that placement is later erased, the connection alone is enough to spark debate. It's the same reason people scrutinize Kanye's relationship with certain figures, or why Leonardo DiCaprio's name trended when Epstein's records were discussed. In the age of receipts, nobody is above being questioned, especially not when the consequences are this serious. And this is where the Carter's strategy may come back to bite them. Because they've never been ones to publicly correct the record. They don't do TMZ, they don't hop on Instagram Live, they don't release Notes app statements. So now, even as their legal team scrubs their names from a filing, there's no official statement, no denial, no context, nothing to help the public separate fact from fiction. And when the only thing louder than the scandal is your silence, that silence becomes the story. It also doesn't help that this lawsuit isn't a one-off. It's part of a larger avalanche of cases stacking up against it, each one more disturbing than the last, each one pointing to a lifestyle and a pattern that allegedly thrived in secrecy and excess, and each one pulling new names into the orbit, names that once looked untouchable. And here's another uncomfortable layer. Some fans are wondering whether the removal of Beyonce and Jay-Z's names is less about protecting the truth and more about protecting the industry. Because if two of the biggest stars in music, arguably the most powerful couple in entertainment, were officially listed in a case like this, even as witnesses, it threatens the whole illusion. That illusion of glamour, of morality, of being untouchable. So now, instead of clearing the air, the edit just makes people dig deeper. What other names have been pulled from similar filings? What other stories were almost told, but got silenced? And if someone like Beyonce can be named in a court document, and then scrubbed a few weeks later without a word of explanation, it makes people wonder how many stories never even made it to paper. The entertainment world thrives on image. But what we're seeing right now with Diddy, with this lawsuit, with the quiet edits and strategic silences is a breakdown of that image. A moment where the audience is no longer satisfied with curated perfection. They want answers. And when answers aren't given, they fill in the blanks themselves. That's why this story is far from over. Even if Beyonce and Jay-Z are never legally tied to anything here, even if the court never mentions their names again, the moment they were in and then out of this lawsuit, the clock started ticking. And every move since then has only fueled speculation. Because if they were never there, say it. If it was a mistake, explain it. But when something this serious lands at your feet, and your only response is silence, that's not damage control. That's a vacuum. And vacuums always get filled with rumors, with theories, with narratives you can't control. Beyonce and Jay-Z have spent decades shaping how the world sees them. But in this moment, their silence is shaping something else entirely. So Beyonce and Jay-Z can keep pretending their names were never there. But the internet saw it, screenshotted it, and yeah, it's way too late to act like it never happened. Stick around, because what comes next, you're not gonna wanna miss it. So don't forget to like and subscribe.